I'm a sophomore at West High School. Sophomore in Memorial.
You're at West High School.
My name is Zeke, and I'm a freshman at Fall High School.
My name is Brandon, and I'm a 10th grader at West High School.
Chandri, my name is Zijan, and I'm a sophomore from Madison West High School.
Freshman from Bell Phillips Memorial.
Soraya, and I'm a freshman from Capitol High.
Jay, I'm a junior from East. And I am a junior from Madison East High School. I'm Ruby, and I'm a freshman from Bell Phillips Memorial. My name is Selena. I'm a freshman and I attend to La High School.
Aiden Olson, and I am a junior at Madison West High School.
My name is Charco, and I'm a junior at
Student voice is often overlooked and tokenized in educational settings. As superintendent, it is important to have an innate desire to consistently listen to students and learn from their experiences. Please provide an example of how you have engaged with students face-to-face in the past. Ensure that student voice is properly represented and reflective of the diverse student population. How do you plan to directly involve students in important discussions and decisions?
So, we can have all the student advisory councils, we can have structured work groups, and those things are important. Sometimes you have to put together a task force to solve things. Student voice in that way. Are time bound, they're not recurring, and sometimes, like you use the word token, yes, they're more ceremonial, and the follow through isn't quite there, and the feedback loop is not there. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is people's lived experiences. I'm superintendent in Maryland, as well as my time as a chief in districts. I love shadowing. I love building that into the day, right? I love shadowing students, whether you are 2 grade levels, not where you need to be, whether you are struggling with math, or whether you are a student who has straight A's, taking calculus BC, although I did a lot of help. I love shadowing students. And I don't need a ceremonial act or a document on the show. I need to take out your day with you. If you have PE, taking PE. If crisscross applesauce, which I can still do, I can still do that. I love shadowing students and documenting and learning and picking up themes, and then ultimately bringing back that to a team in order to make shifts in how we support our work. Every school is supposed to be designed to service all students well, not by themselves. The schools are supposed to be tied to a network of supports in the community and central office, but the entire school system, MMSD, should be designed to serve all students well. We are only as strong, right? That's how good we are. As our most struggling student, whoever they are, right? That's as good as we are today. And in order to unlock answers, in order to know that, you got to shadow students. I will want to have student advisory councils. I will want to have all those things. I will want to have time bound. But that will be a normal. Working in bigger systems, right? I'm working in school system, matured in some schools. I'm working in school system, 70 schools, and then an entire state with 1,400 schools with different districts visiting. Madison is a place where I can visit and shadow students on a regular basis across every school every year. That's a commitment. Sure that I'm also documenting, sharing what I'm learning and what I'm doing with that work as well. That's something that I was thinking.
Question is, Madison has
largest achievement gaps in the state in the past couple of decades. As students, we have also noticed significant achievement gaps within our schools. In order to rectify this, we also attempt to change the need. Share a specific example of how you have effectively worked to narrow achievement gaps within schools.
Ultimately, it's about making sure students get what they need at the right moment at the right time, right? It's about getting what you need at the right moment at the right time, right? The first 6 months of school, right, are very, very important. Not when we get into late into the spring, when the spring testing is coming about, right? You have to be able to have systematic points in which you are checking to see how everyone is doing, right? And respond with supports around that. So one of the things that we did, and I'm going to talk about middle school, right? Middle school, as a middle school teacher, so I have a very special place in my heart for middle school. So whatever strategy chief in Dallas or San Antonio or a state superintendent, I had prioritized making sure we get middle schools right. Because you'll see in research, a lot of brain development happens in the first 5 years of life. And then another spurt happens early middle school. And rather than responding in a way that channels that energy, systems tend to start treating middle schoolers in a way that leads to more. We know that when you design schools in a way that systematically builds into the day and the schedules and the time to look time in specific to Alice is we launched school models that would build into the day, right? Something called that is taking a moment every 6 weeks, right? Teachers who teach this student, who has this student, whether it's math, English, they might be doing fine in math, but they might be struggling in reading. But there's something to unlock with all teachers coming together to be able to provide that. That helped narrow a lot of our gaps because at the end of the day, it's about instructional coaches, you have your TA, you have your partners from the community, you have set. And saying, when I was a teacher back in Los Angeles, our class sizes were huge. We had like 36 kids. I was middle school. I became a great teacher because I followed every one of those individual education plans, as a teacher to the form. And even also useful and helpful for students for sure. How do you systematize that? You have to build it into those things. Built through our transformation of the when I was in Dallas, and we also will scale that work.
Question 3. In order to build an effective representation coalition in Madison, the next superintendent would have to bring in racial, cultural, lingual, and economic development. Please share how you can approach multiple groups on a large scale and build a coalition to achieve positive outcomes for all students.
So, ultimately, it's about creating problems of practice and issues that transcend difference, right? There are issues that we often have in experience, but it's so easy to be silent, so easy to self-segregate, right? Even the way things are laid out, down to where we play, down to where our home is, down to even how groups are selected, right? I often say, right, in order to design for integration, design for people to work together, you have to intentionally do it because we are by design also segregated, right? When it comes to different types of work streams. So for me, it's always been about, so when I was the Chief Innovation Officer in San Antonio ISD, our work involved how do you get central office to differentiate for every school, right? We had a theory of action that we were trying to implement. It was called managed instruction. Just essentially that we want to make sure these things, managed instruction, are true in all of our schools. And we want to reinforce that. We want to make sure they're true. And if it has to look a certain that also something called performance empowerment. That part meant that every school and its needs are different, right? Ultimately, you have to bring people together around a set of problems of practice that they solve together. So one of the things that we did was we looked at all of our low performing schools and the struggles that they had. We put together a group of people across different parts of central office, across different parts of the community, at the most critical things that they were struggling with, right? A lot of it was rooted in our growth supports, making sure students have a growth support. Some of our students were dealing with housing insecurity and food insecurity, right? But no one school can solve that by themselves. So, but that was a theme across many of our local public schools. And teachers were having to develop tap into the rich resource and assets of the community and people together around that problem of practice, and we thought about what is the best way to coordinate, to reinforce, to deploy, to sustain that level of support across our school system. And so that is the type of thinking that we'll bring. Ultimately, it's about putting people together in a room, different in terms of thinking, in terms of background, in terms of expertise, in order to unlock the best possible answer. Because if you do that, and you unlock something, I believe it sticks to the bones of an organization. Just bring people who think alike and with the same level of expertise. You're only going to solve one aspect of this nation. You're not going to solve that process, right? We thought it was an academic problem that teachers were not effective in teaching, right? Yeah, there was something that we needed to get better, but it was really a wraparound support machine. And a lot of it dealt with housing insecurity and food insecurity. So we needed to figure out.
This is great. It's your part back.
For that question, I go back to what I shared with you, right? A school system is only as good as its most struggling student. Our school system has to be designed, right, that serves and meets the needs of every child. Ultimately, every single one of our schools, it's something I said in our intro video, right? We have to be able to put around every single school, every single teacher, right, a network of supports that enables them to deploy, right, additional differentiation beyond just what teachers are doing every day in the classroom, right? The best instruction first has to happen in the classroom, right? We call it effective tier 1 instruction. We want to make sure that all students are getting grade level standards, they are held to high expectations. And then when the time comes to see and assess what students' understandings are and where they are in that developmental point, right? Then we differentiate, but that differentiation cannot just happen alone with a single teacher, right? You have to be able to leverage, right, during the school day, right? You have to be able to leverage your network of supports. How are you using your paraprofessionals? How are you using your instructional coaches? How are you using, right, your partnership with an after-school program who comes and does additional literacy support and math support or enrichment support, right? All of that has to be intricately designed in order to reinforce that support. I ultimately believe that we have to develop an ecosystem of support around a teacher who makes sure that every one of their students, after they have been able to provide them with high quality instruction and support, they can entrust that there is another system of support outside of themselves that will reinforce the content that they're trying to get them to master. You have to be able to do that, and you can't do that just by accident. You have to be able to curate that, you have to design that. Ultimately, I've spent the last part of my career because I was entrusted in every one of the school systems I've been to develop new schools, to put principals and teachers and staff and community to design and reimagine how they use their talent resource within the school day. You gotta get creative with that. You gotta get strategic with that. And ultimately, to me, it's designed for that support, but it cannot happen. You cannot just expect a single teacher to do that. It might take a tutor. It might take a peer, right? It might take a student to be a classmate who can explain it to them better than the teacher. But you have to design for that experience. And if you don't design for that experience, you're not going to tap into support. So that's how I
The LMSD website states, we believe that resources are critical to education and we are responsible for their equity and effective use. As of 2022-2023 school year in the four-year high school plan, the district has a graduation rate of 93% when it comes to neurotypical and able-bodied students. But it has a 63% graduation rate when it comes to disabled students or students with IEPs. Given that the district's beliefs say that all resources such as IEPs, 504, adaptive curriculum, building accessibility, etc., are critical and effective and equitable education, how do you plan to improve that graduation rate, as well as enforce disability and accessibility protocols?
First off, when it comes to graduation rates or just learning and making sure that students with disabilities and their typically developing peers, the gaps between them are narrow. And we know first right off the bat that tier 1 instruction, that vast majority of our students with disabilities, students with IEPs, it's over 70% of them can succeed in the mainstream classroom. So we know right off the bat that there is challenges with how that content is being delivered. Starts with belief, right? Oftentimes when you see an IEP, whether or not people admit it, you begin to start lowering your expectations. You begin to start lowering what you think that student is able to do. And we have to fight against that. We have to make sure that that's not happening. When we say all students can succeed, right? Students, especially students with IEPs on a mild to moderate level of needs, then we need to back that up. And in order to back up our beliefs, ultimately, we have to go back to that network of supports I said, right? There isn't some magic program that will ultimately level where it needs to be. It's gonna be the right support, the right intervention at the right time. And it needs to be those first 6 months of school, right? We need to be able to come around every student, right? And to make sure that we are putting that web of supports around them to get it right for them. Because graduation rates can deal with a wide variety of things, right? It could be assignments, it could be course credits, it could be attendance, it could be a life issue. We don't know what that is ultimately, but in order to know that, you ultimately have to make sure you treat every student, right? Like the individual needs that you say. That's why I have to go back to it as a teacher, right? Those IEPs may be the best teacher I could be for all kids because I learned from being able to differentiate for a single student with IEP had implications for my broader classroom. So when I think about graduation rates and moving back, it's not just some magic program. Ultimately, it's about seeing what Mohammed needs. Why is he off track? First, we need to know that he's off track. Freshman year is critical. Right off the bat, we have strong data around the country that shows that if you are off track starting in 9th grade with a certain number of course credits, your ability to finish gets harder and harder. So it's the right intervention at the right time. But I need to know that by the first semester, and not even the first semester, the first grading period. And during that first grading period, when I see that Mohammed is struggling, right? To ultimately get him to succeed and support. Your second part of your question, I want to make sure I address that. How would you enforce that? It's through that work. Ultimately, it's through that work. I can say on a piece of paper, do not make sure every student is included. That means today, how a system responds when someone is struggling tells you everything about that system.
Madison is an exceptionally diverse place with a lot of mixed opinions. From your experience as a leader, please share a time where you were faced with a hard ethical decision, pressure from multiple sides. How did you navigate the situation? What was the outcome? And looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
So I will share with you my time in San Antonio. So one of the things that I was interested to do was to build a new enrollment office. We had not had an enrollment office. And with that work, also be able to assess what we have been doing when it came to accessing specialized programs. Think your early college high schools, your Montessori schools, your dual language schools, etc., your magnet schools. For the longest of time, those schools were essentially selecting kids who were high performing. And that's how it was designed. Ultimately, every individual school came up with its own admissions policies, and those admissions policies led to all sorts of decisions. Some people got in just because they knew someone and they pressured the school to get them in, while others were denied because they didn't have the political capital and social capital to be able to exert that pressure. We were going to unify enrollment. It was called a Unified Enrollment Initiative, right? And bring equity of access to it. And what that meant ultimately was being able to create a lottery process that truly, in a blind manner, right, picked students who were interested. So it was students at our early college high schools took 150 students, and 300 students were interested in it, whether that was a C student or a straight A student, that the C student had an equal shot to get into that school because they could also succeed. And they could also do well. Just because you get a C doesn't mean you're any less than the A if going to an early college high school. And so ultimately faced a lot of tensions and pushback because I was about to put forth a policy that was going to take power away from individual schools to be able to pick their students for these specialized programs. We ultimately decided to take a pilot and scale approach. What that meant is rather than right off the bat and say, all of you guys have to do this today, we picked schools where principals and their staff raised their hand and said, we want to redesign our system. We know it's inequitable. We want to show and be a proof case that all kids can succeed in these schools, especially students who are English learners, students with IEPs, students from historically disadvantaged backgrounds. Ultimately, that led to us to be able to show proof points that these students can thrive equally alongside their peers who were more high achieving. And it led to a more equitable system. San Antonio's college and career readiness rate, when we arrived, tradition under Superintendent Martinez was at 10%. When we were done 4 years later, it was at 65%, our college readiness rate. That's an extraordinary jump for all kids, by the way, all boats rising. And I can tell you why it's all boats, because our system was 90% poor, with 90% historically marginalized communities. So it wasn't driven by, high averages and such. But that was a tough decision because it meant wrangling some power brokers who needed to be waitlisted, right? But guess what? They were going to be just fine because them not getting that option, they still had 3 more options, including their neighborhood school in an affluent neighborhood. For that other child, getting into that early college high school program was going to be life-changing. And so ultimately to stood by it, to this day it stays on, and it's something that I'm really proud of. But even the mayor's child got waitlisted program. And it was like, I wanted to see if I was going to get political pressure to get them off the list. And said, I'm happy to have gotten waitlisted. That shows that we are building a more fair system. And he knew that the child was going to be okay because of them that they and others.
Please share your experience with similar climate or MMSD achieve their.
So I can tell you from my experience, I've been in a system that said we are gonna go full 100%. I was in Texas for 10 years in school systems, and philosophical leanings of the state government, right, made it difficult to commit to certain things when it came to how to move away from certain vendors who are contributing negatively to our environment. So, however, we as a community in Dallas, we as a community in San Antonio, right, we did several things to build towards a more just and equitable environmental community. And we were urban cities, by the way, right? People often think climate action deals with just areas that don't look like urban cities, but they do. So there's a couple of things that I would share with you. One, we worked over time to convert our buses to an electric fleet, right? It's not cheap, but it takes time and it won't happen overnight. But we know, for example, when we did that in San Antonio, 40% of our carbon footprint, right? It's like taking 14,000 cars off of the streets, right? In terms of being able to convert San Antonio's buses to that. But that took time. That project, right, involved several bonds and several pieces. Another thing that I would share is every micro action adds up to a big action, right? And so ultimately we have to get better at monitoring to our community, to our schools, to our central office staff in terms of their habits, right? We used to have a central office where people had mini fridges in their cubicles. You know how negative that is when it comes to environmental impact, when it comes to the energy and sucking, right? So when we developed an initiative to take that away while also making sure that their needs were met, right? We had to do that very thoughtfully, right? Because years of habit had made people want to just have that accessible. So we had to reimagine what the space looks like. So one of the things that's going to be important to me is our habits and what we do, right? How central office operates, how schools operate, how we utilize data to make micro level decisions that add up to this. 100% absolutely should be the goal, and we should try to pull that off, but that's going to take time. I can tell you one thing that makes it easier is if you have a state leadership. I know there's progressive leadership in the city of Madison, but if you have also state leadership invested in that, you get that much more closer. I'm a California kid. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. They're getting further ahead in moving things because there's leadership around that. Whereas when I was in Texas, it was more zone of control and what we can do versus a broader policy shift for impact.
Questions? So now I can open the floor to the question that you have.
So you guys said, I love the first question. I love the word tokenism because can someone explain to me what's the source of that question? Like, what is there something that is not happening? Is there a lack of feedback loops? Is there the follow through? Can someone give me a little more? Why was that question developed in the first place?
To make sure that students were being included on important decisions. I think many of the students in this room have been in a situation with adults where they've asked for like input from the student, but like it's clear that they're looking for certain things for the student to say, and it just doesn't feel like the student is being seen. And in educational settings, when a lot of times the decisions are impacting the students, it's extremely important that the student voice is taken into account when making these decisions so that they're reflective of the community. And so when adults like look for specific answers from students, it's still not like being reflective of like what the students actually think. And so we wanted to make sure that the superintendent students the opportunity to express like how they feel and the opportunity to take in creating those roles or in creating decisions in like a co-create type habitat.
Next question, and I'd love 3 examples and just tell me what it is and why. Over the past, since your time, since you've been a student in Madison, what is one thing that the district has done that has made it that much better to make sure students are successful? What is one thing that you have been very proud of that MMSD has done over your 11-year career, your 10-year career? What have they done? One thing, and why was it such a game-changing thing for students? Like it truly changed the student experience in order for students to be more successful through their educational career.
One thing that I have felt is that we have become a lot more aware of a lot more diversity. We've brought awareness to many sort of, I want to say, is that we've brought attention to many different issues within our schools. We've created many student coalition groups who try to work with the school in order to tackle issues that students might feel from these schools, and I feel like that has definitely helped students to voice their opinions. I do agree with Lavinia. We do sometimes feel that the school sometimes is like they want specific words to come out of our mouths, but overall, I definitely feel that it has definitely become more of like a student voice, and that we've brought attention to many areas that we feel we may. I feel like we've improved upon understanding microaggressions within schools. We've understood, I believe that we've created an anti-racist communication team at, for example, West, and we have really pushed forward to raise awareness of the various hurtful words that may some schools. So I'm really thankful that, we raise awareness to these issues.
One thing that I noticed made a big impact was making sure that students with special needs their situations are explained, so that way they feel they have the same opportunities as other students. For me, on a personal level, my little sister is autistic and nonverbal, and at her school, they talked about being nonverbal and how it's like not a normal thing, but like a thing that should be more normalized. And she has been able to create friends based off of the decisions made on normalizing and talking about these different situations.
That's really excellent.
That is all the time we have. Thank you for talking with us today.
Okay, so